In a small town called Maplewood, life moved at a slow and predictable pace. The streets were lined with cozy homes, and the air carried the scent of fresh-cut grass. Among the residents were Jack and Emily Carter, a married couple who lived in a modest house at the edge of town. Jack loved stargazing and spent many nights in his backyard, peering through his old telescope at the vast night sky. Emily, on the other hand, preferred books and spent her days working at the local library, surrounded by stories of faraway places. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack set up his telescope as usual. The sky was clear, dotted with countless stars that twinkled like tiny diamonds. He adjusted the lens, searching for constellations he had memorized over the years. But then, something unusual caught his eye. A faint blinking light moved steadily across the sky, unlike anything he had ever seen before. It wasn't an airplane. It didn't flash red or white. It wasn't a satellite either, as its movement was too erratic. Jack frowned, puzzled but intrigued. He grabbed his phone and recorded the strange light, zooming in as much as the camera allowed. The next morning, Jack showed the video to Emily. She watched it silently, her brow furrowed. "It's probably nothing," she said, though her tone betrayed a hint of unease. "Maybe just space junk or something." Jack nodded, but deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that what he had seen was significant. Later that day, news reports began flooding in about strange atmospheric disturbances. People in big cities around the world claimed to have seen glowing lights in the sky, accompanied by low-frequency hums that rattled windows and made pets restless. Social media buzzed with theories. Some suggested secret government experiments, while others whispered about aliens. Most people dismissed the stories as exaggerations or hoaxes, but the reports kept coming, growing more frequent and detailed. That evening, as Jack and Emily sat together in their living room, their phones buzzed simultaneously. A notification popped up on every screen in the house. Unknown extraterrestrial activity detected. The message was brief and lacked details, but its implications were clear. For the first time in history, humanity had received undeniable proof of alien existence. Jack turned to Emily, his face pale. "Did you see that?" he asked, his voice trembling. Emily nodded slowly, clutching her phone tightly. Neither of them spoke for a moment, the weight of the situation sinking in. Outside, the usually quiet neighborhood felt different. Neighbors gathered on their porches, talking in hushed tones. Children pointed excitedly at the sky, while parents looked up with a mix of wonder and fear. The stars seemed brighter that night, almost as if they were watching the earth intently. As the hours passed, the tension grew. Then, without warning, massive ships descended from the heavens, appearing above major cities across the globe. They were enormous, their metallic surfaces reflecting the moonlight. In Maplewood, the sight was visible even from miles away. Jack rushed outside, binoculars in hand, to get a better look. Emily followed reluctantly, her heart pounding. "What's happening, Jack?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack didn't answer. He was too focused on the ship hovering silently above the horizon. Its presence was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. For the first time in his life, Jack felt truly small. Unbeknownst to them, the real chaos was only beginning. The world woke up to a reality it had only imagined in movies and books. Massive alien ships loomed over cities, their shadows stretching across streets and buildings like giants observing ants. In Maplewood, the sight of the nearest ship was both mesmerizing and terrifying. It hovered silently above the horizon, its metallic surface gleaming in the sunlight. People gathered in groups, pointing and whispering, unsure whether to run, hide, or simply stare. Jack Carter stood among the crowd, his binoculars pressed tightly against his eyes. He scanned the ship, searching for any sign of movement or activity. Emily stood beside him, her arms crossed as if trying to shield herself from the cold grip of fear. "What do you think they want?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jack lowered the binoculars and shook his head. "I don't know," he admitted. but I'm sure we'll find out soon enough. As the hours passed, governments around the world scrambled to respond. Military jets soared into the sky, attempting to communicate with the alien ships. Radio signals, flashing lights, and even attempts at Morse code were sent, but the aliens remained silent. The tension grew thicker with each passing minute. Then, without warning, one of the ships broke away from its position above a major city and began moving toward Maplewood. Its descent was slow and deliberate, as if it had a specific destination in mind. Panic erupted in the small town. Cars sped down the streets, horns blaring as people fled their homes. Jack grabbed Emily's hand and pulled her back inside, locking the door behind them. They watched through the window as the ship descended further, finally settling in the nearby forest. The ground shook slightly as its engines powered down, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Not long after, military vehicles arrived, kicking up clouds of dust as they surrounded the ship. Soldiers in full gear set up a perimeter, their weapons ready. Among them was Lieutenant Rachel Dawson, a stern woman with sharp features and a no-nonsense attitude. She barked orders to her team, her eyes fixed on the ship. Like everyone else, she didn't know what to expect, but she was determined to be prepared for anything. Curiosity got the better of Jack. Despite Emily's protests, he grabbed his camera and slipped out the back door, sneaking closer to the scene. From behind a tree, he filmed the soldiers and the ship, capturing every detail. His heart raced as he realized how close he was to something that could change the course of human history. Suddenly, the ship's surface began to shift. A section of its metal exterior slid open, revealing a bright light within. Jack held his breath as a figure stepped out. It was humanoid, but clearly not human. Its skin shimmered like polished silver, and its eyes glowed faintly blue. It raised a hand in what seemed to be a gesture of peace. Lieutenant Dawson approached cautiously, her weapon raised but not aimed. Jack couldn't hear what was being said, but he saw the alien speaking. Moments later, a voice echoed through the area, amplified by some unseen technology. "This planet is under evaluation," the voice said, calm and mechanical. "Resistance will be met with annihilation." The words sent a chill through everyone present. Jack's hands trembled as he continued filming, knowing he was witnessing something monumental. The alien identified itself as Cal-7, an envoy from the Galactic Empire. Its mission, it explained, was not conquest but judgment. Earth had unknowingly violated interstellar laws by broadcasting signals into space, a reckless act that drew unwanted attention. Humanity would now face a test. If they passed, Earth would be spared. If they failed, destruction would follow. The deadline was set, 24 hours. Lieutenant Dawson listened intently, her expression unreadable. When she noticed Jack filming from the trees, she signaled for him to leave immediately. Reluctantly, he obeyed, retreating back to the safety of his home. As he recounted what he had seen to Emily, the weight of the situation settled heavily on them both. The clock was ticking, and the fate of humanity rested on their ability, or inability, to come together. The message from Cal-7 spread quickly, carried by phones, televisions, and radios across the globe. People listened in stunned silence as the alien's cold, mechanical voice echoed through their devices. "This planet is under evaluation. Resistance will be met with annihilation." The words were simple, but their meaning was devastating. Earth had 24 hours to prove its worth, or face destruction. In Maplewood, Jack and Emily sat together on their couch, staring at the blank TV screen long after the broadcast ended. The room felt heavy, as if the air itself was pressing down on them. "What does it mean?" Emily whispered, breaking the silence. Jack shook his head, still trying to process everything. "I don't know," he admitted, "but it sounds like they're giving us a chance. A test." As the hours passed, panic began to ripple through the world. In cities, people flooded the streets, some shouting in anger, others crying in fear. Grocery stores were raided, and gas stations ran out of fuel as families tried to flee. Governments held emergency meetings, but tensions between nations only grew worse. Leaders argued over how to respond, each wanting to take charge, but none agreeing on a plan. Back in Maplewood, the military presence around the alien ship remained strong. Soldiers patrolled the area, keeping curious onlookers at bay. Lieutenant Rachel Dawson stood near the edge of the forest, her eyes fixed on the ship. She had spent years preparing for crisis, but nothing could have prepared her for this. Her radio crackled constantly with updates from command, but the messages offered little guidance. Humanity's fate rested on passing a test no one fully understood. Jack couldn't stay away. Despite Emily's pleas to stay safe, he found himself drawn back to the edge of the woods. He kept his distance this time, watching from behind a cluster of trees. His camera hung around his neck, ready to capture any new developments. He noticed Lieutenant Dawson speaking urgently with another officer. Their expressions were tense, and Jack strained to hear their conversation, but the words were lost in the hum of activity around them. Then, something unexpected happened. Kel 7 emerged from the ship again, stepping into the sunlight. Its silver skin shimmered, and its glowing blue eyes seemed to pierce through the crowd. This time, it carried a small device in its hand, holding it up for everyone to see. The device emitted a soft glow, projecting images into the air. They showed scenes of Earth, cities bustling with life, forests teeming with wildlife, oceans stretching endlessly. But then the images shifted, showing pollution choking rivers, smoke rising from factories, and wars tearing communities apart. Cal 7 spoke again, its voice calm but firm. "Your species has potential," it said. "But your actions harm not only yourselves, but also the balance of the universe. To survive, you must demonstrate unity and cooperation. You have 24 hours. Prove that you are capable of change." The message sent shockwaves through the gathered crowd. Some people nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Others muttered in disbelief, refusing to accept the challenge. Jack watched intently, his mind racing. What did unity even look like? How could billions of people come together in such a short time? Lieutenant Dawson approached Cal 7 cautiously, her weapon holstered but her hand resting near it. "What happens if we fail?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Cal 7 paused before answering. "Failure will result in annihilation," it said simply. "Your planet will be cleansed, and your species erased." The weight of those words hung in the air, heavier than ever. As Cal 7 returned to the ship, the soldiers began packing up their equipment. Lieutenant Dawson glanced toward the trees where Jack was hiding. For a moment, their eyes met, and Jack froze, unsure if he should run or stay. Instead of calling him out, Dawson turned away, her jaw clenched tightly. When Jack returned home, he found Emily pacing anxiously in the living room. She stopped when she saw him, her eyes wide with worry. "What's going on?" she asked. Jack hesitated, then told her everything he had seen and heard. Emily listened quietly, her hands clutching the hem of her sweater. When he finished, she took a deep breath. "We can't just sit here and do nothing," she said firmly. "If this is really happening, we need to help." Jack nodded slowly. He didn't know how they could make a difference, but he agreed. They couldn't stand by and watch while the world fell apart. Together, they decided to act, not just for themselves, but for everyone. Time was running out, and humanity's survival depended on finding a way to unite. The days following the alien departure were filled with a mix of relief and uncertainty. In Maplewood, life slowly began to return to normal, but nothing felt quite the same. Jack and Emily noticed subtle changes in their neighbors. People smiled more, held doors open for one another, and took time to check on those who lived alone. The candlelit gathering in the park had left a lasting impression, reminding everyone of what they could achieve when they worked together. Around the world, similar shifts occurred. Leaders who had once argued bitterly over borders and resources now spoke cautiously about collaboration. Aid poured into regions that had long been neglected, and communities came together to rebuild after years of conflict. Social media buzzed with stories of kindness. Teachers helping struggling students, doctors volunteering in underserved areas, and strangers offering shelter to those in need. Humanity had been given a second chance, and many seemed determined not to waste it. But not everything was perfect. In some places, old tensions flared back to life as fear and mistrust resurfaced. Riots broke out in cities where people felt abandoned by their governments, and arguments erupted over how to move forward. Critics questioned whether the acts of unity seen during the crisis were genuine or just temporary reactions to the threat of annihilation. Jack and Emily followed the news closely, aware that the road ahead would be difficult. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Lieutenant Rachel Dawson stopped by. She had been assigned to oversee cleanup efforts near the forest, but often found herself thinking about the small town that had inspired so much change. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, gesturing to the empty chairs. Jack and Emily exchanged surprised glances before nodding. "Of course," Jack said, pulling out a chair for her. They talked for hours, sharing their thoughts about what had happened and what might come next. Dawson admitted she had doubted humanity's ability to unite at first, but seeing the efforts in Maplewood and around the world had given her hope. "You two started something special," she said, looking at them earnestly. "Don't underestimate the power of simple actions." Inspired by her words, Jack and Emily decided to keep the spirit of unity alive. They organized weekly meetings in the park, inviting anyone who wanted to participate. At first, only a handful of people showed up, but over time, the gatherings grew larger. Neighbors shared ideas for improving the community, from cleaning up local parks to starting a food drive for families in need. Even children got involved, drawing pictures of Earth surrounded by stars and handing them out to passersby. Word of Maplewood's efforts spread, inspiring other towns to follow suit. Soon, communities across the country were organizing their own events, each adding their unique touch to the growing movement. In New York, artists painted murals depicting diverse hands reaching toward the sky. In California, volunteers planted trees along highways, symbolizing growth and renewal. Every act, no matter how small, contributed to a sense of global connection. Meanwhile, scientists and researchers worked tirelessly to understand the technology used by the Galactic Empire. Governments pooled resources, sharing data and collaborating on projects that would have been impossible before. For the first time, humanity felt like part of something greater, a species capable of overcoming its differences when faced with a common goal. Jack and Emily watched these developments with pride, knowing they had played a role in sparking change. But they also knew the journey was far from over. One evening, as they stood in their backyard gazing at the stars, Emily voiced what both of them were thinking. "Do you think they're still watching us?" she asked quietly. Jack shrugged, his eyes fixed on the night sky. "Maybe," he replied. "But even if they're not, we've got to keep trying. This isn't just about them, it's about us." As the stars twinkled above, the couple felt a renewed sense of purpose. The Galactic Empire may have left, but its message remained. Humanity's survival depended on its ability to unite. And for now, at least it seemed like people were ready to rise to the challenge. As the clock ticked down, Maplewood buzzed with a mix of fear and determination. Jack and Emily spent hours brainstorming ways to inspire unity in their small town. They knew they couldn't solve global problems alone, but they believed that even small actions could spark change. The message from Cal 7 had been clear. Humanity needed to show it could work together. But how? Jack decided to share what he had witnessed near the alien ship. He uploaded his videos online, narrating what he had seen and heard. His words were simple but heartfelt. "We're all scared," he said into the camera, his hands trembling slightly. "But we can't let fear divide us. If we want to survive, we have to come together, not just as a town, but as a planet." Emily sat beside him, nodding in agreement. She added her own thoughts, urging people to put aside their differences and focus on what united them. The video went viral almost instantly. People around the world watched it, sharing it across social media platforms. Comments poured in, some skeptical, others hopeful. Many viewers were inspired by Jack and Emily's courage. In living rooms, schools, and community centers, conversations began about how to demonstrate unity. For the first time, the overwhelming sense of helplessness started to shift into something else: hope. In Maplewood, the change was visible. Neighbors who had barely spoken before now gathered to discuss ideas. A local church opened its doors to host a meeting, inviting everyone to attend. Jack and Emily joined the crowd, surprised by how many people showed up. There were disagreements at first. Some wanted to organize protests, while others suggested reaching out to world leaders. But eventually, a young girl named Lily Myers stood up and spoke. Lily was only 12 years old, but her voice carried wisdom beyond her years. "Why don't we show them that we care?" she asked, looking around the room. "What if we light candles and stand together? It's simple, but it shows we're one." Her idea struck a chord. People nodded in agreement, and plans quickly took shape. Flyers were printed, and messages spread through the town. By nightfall, hundreds of residents gathered in the park, each holding a candle. The scene was peaceful yet powerful. Rows of flickering lights formed the words, "We are one," across the open field. Cameras clicked and phones recorded as people stood silently, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the candles. Jack filmed the moment, capturing the unity that Lily's idea had sparked. When he uploaded the video online, it resonated deeply with viewers worldwide. Other towns and cities followed Maplewood's example. In New York, thousands of people gathered in Times Square, holding candles and signs with messages of peace. In London, crowds filled Trafalgar Square, their voices chanting songs of unity. Even in places torn by conflict, acts of kindness emerged. Soldiers laid down their weapons temporarily, sharing meals with those they had once opposed. Strangers helped each other, offering food, shelter, and comfort. Lieutenant Rachel Dawson noticed the changes too. As she monitored reports coming in from around the globe, she saw images of people standing together, defying the fear that had gripped them earlier. She felt a glimmer of hope, though she kept her emotions hidden beneath her professional demeanor. Still, when she passed Jack and Emily on the street later that evening, she paused. "You two did good," she said simply, her tone softer than usual. Jack and Emily exchanged surprised glances, but didn't respond. They hadn't expected recognition, but Dawson's words meant more than she realized. Despite the progress, challenges remained. Not everyone was willing to set aside their anger or mistrust. Riots broke out in some areas, and arguments between nations continued behind closed doors. But for every act of division, there seemed to be another of connection. Stories of generosity and compassion spread like wildfire, reminding people of their shared humanity. As the final hours approached, Jack and Emily returned to their backyard. They looked up at the stars, wondering if the Galactic Empire was watching. "Do you think it'll be enough?" Emily asked quietly. Jack hesitated before answering. "I don't know," he admitted, "but we gave it our best shot." The night grew darker, and the world held its breath. Whatever happened next, humanity had taken its first steps toward unity. And that, Jack thought, might just be enough. As the final hours of the deadline approached, the world braced itself for what was to come. Cities were quieter than usual, with streets mostly empty as people stayed indoors, glued to their screens and radios. In Maplewood, the park where residents had gathered with candles the night before remained a symbol of hope. The words, "We are one," were still visible, painted carefully on the grass by volunteers who wanted the message to last. Jack and Emily sat together in their living room, unable to sleep. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second feeling heavier than the last. Emily held a cup of tea between her hands, though it had long gone cold. "Do you think they saw it?" she asked softly, referring to the videos and images shared online. Jack nodded slowly. "I think so," he replied. "Even if it's not enough, at least we tried." Around the globe, Acts of unity continued to unfold. In some places, former enemies shook hands and vowed to work together. Aid workers distributed food and supplies to those in need, while artists painted murals celebrating diversity and cooperation. Social media was flooded with messages of love and support, connecting strangers across continents. Humanity wasn't perfect. There were still moments of anger and division. But for the first time, many people felt like they were part of something bigger. In Maplewood, Lieutenant Rachel Dawson stood near the edge of the forest, watching the alien ship silently. She had been awake all night, monitoring updates from command and ensuring the area remained secure. Though she rarely showed emotion, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of pride when she saw the candlelit gathering in the park. It reminded her that even in the face of overwhelming odds, people could find ways to connect. As midnight drew closer, Cal 7 emerged from the ship once more. This time, it was accompanied by several smaller drones that hovered silently above the ground. The drones began scanning the area, their lights pulsing rhythmically. People watched nervously, unsure what to expect. Jack and Emily joined the crowd gathering near the forest, their hearts pounding with anticipation. Cal 7 raised its hand, and the hum of the drones grew louder. Then, the envoy spoke. "Your species has demonstrated potential," it said, its voice echoing through the air. "Though your actions remain inconsistent, you have shown the capacity for unity and compassion." A collective sigh of relief rippled through the crowd, but Cal 7 wasn't finished. "This reprieve is temporary. Learn to coexist, or face the consequences." With that, the drones powered down and returned to the ship. Cal 7 stepped back inside, and the vessel began to rise into the sky. Its engines roared to life, sending vibrations through the ground. Within moments, it was gone, disappearing into the clouds and leaving behind an eerie silence. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, cheers erupted from the crowd. Strangers hugged, tears streaming down their faces. Jack turned to Emily, pulling her into a tight embrace. "We did it," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Emily nodded, burying her face in his shoulder. Nearby, Lieutenant Dawson allowed herself a small smile before turning away to oversee the cleanup efforts. The news spread quickly. Around the world, celebrations broke out as people realized they had been given a second chance. Fireworks lit up the skies in major cities, and songs of gratitude filled the air. But amidst the joy, there was also reflection. Many understood that Cal 7's warning wasn't just about surviving. It was about changing. In Maplewood, Jack and Emily walked home hand in hand, taking in the quiet beauty of their town. The stars above seemed brighter now, twinkling like tiny reminders of how fragile and precious life truly was. "What happens next?" Emily asked, breaking the silence. Jack shrugged. "We keep going," he said simply. "We keep trying to be better." Though the Galactic Empire had left, its message lingered. Humanity had been tested, and while it had passed, the real challenge lay ahead. For now, though, the world breathed a little easier, knowing it had been given a chance to rewrite its story. And in Maplewood, two ordinary people felt proud to have played a small part in it. Months passed since the Galactic Empire's visit, and life on Earth began to settle into a new rhythm. The world had changed in ways both big and small. In Maplewood, the park where the candlelit gathering had taken place became a symbol of hope and unity. People still visited it regularly, leaving flowers or notes of gratitude near the painted words, "We are one." Jack and Emily often walked there in the evenings, watching as families played and friends shared laughter under the open sky. Around the globe, the movement inspired by Maplewood continued to grow. Cities hosted festivals celebrating cultural diversity, while schools introduced programs teaching children about cooperation and empathy. Artists created works honoring humanity's resilience, and scientists worked together across borders to tackle challenges like climate change and disease. It wasn't perfect. Old conflicts sometimes resurfaced, and progress was slow. But there was a sense that the world was moving in the right direction. In Maplewood, Lieutenant Rachel Dawson stayed in touch with Jack and Emily. Though her official duties had ended, she found herself drawn to the town's spirit of community. She attended the weekly meetings at the park, offering advice when needed and lending a hand with local projects. Over time, she became a familiar face, someone people trusted and respected. Her presence reminded everyone of how far they'd come and how much work remained. One crisp autumn evening, Jack and Emily sat on their porch, sipping hot cocoa as leaves swirled in the breeze. The air smelled of wood smoke and earth, carrying a sense of calm they hadn't felt in months. "Do you think we'll ever see them again?" Emily asked, breaking the silence. Jack shrugged, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Maybe," he said thoughtfully, "but I don't think they'll need to test us again. Not if we keep doing what we're doing." As if on cue, a streak of light shot across the sky, catching their attention. Both of them froze, staring upward. For a moment, it looked like the alien ship might return, but the light faded quickly, leaving only stars behind. Jack chuckled nervously, shaking his head. "Probably just a meteor," he said, though his voice carried a hint of doubt. Emily smiled faintly, leaning against him. "Even if it wasn't, we've got this," she said softly. "We've proven we can handle it." The memory of Kel 7 lingered in their minds, a reminder of the fragility of their existence, but it also served as motivation, a call to action rather than fear. Humanity had been given a second chance, and many were determined not to waste it. From city streets to rural villages, people embraced the lessons learned during those fateful 24 hours. Kindness mattered, unity was strength, and every action, no matter how small, could make a difference. In the weeks that followed, Maplewood launched an initiative called One Earth, aimed at fostering global connections. They invited towns and cities worldwide to participate, sharing stories and ideas through online platforms. Schools exchanged letters, musicians collaborated on songs, and chefs swapped recipes, each effort strengthening the bonds between cultures. Even Lieutenant Dawson joined in, using her military contacts to encourage international cooperation. For Jack and Emily, life returned to its quiet routines, but with a deeper sense of purpose. They spent weekends volunteering at the library, helping organize events that brought people together. At night, they stargazed, imagining what lay beyond the vast expanse of space. The possibility of another encounter with the Galactic Empire didn't scare them anymore. It inspired them to be better, to build a future worth protecting. As winter approached, snow blanketed Maplewood, turning the town into a peaceful wonderland. Jack and Emily stood in their backyard, watching flakes drift lazily from the sky. The world was still imperfect, full of challenges and uncertainties, but it was also beautiful. Together, they had faced the unknown and emerged stronger. "We'll be okay," Jack said finally, wrapping an arm around Emily. She nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. Above them, the stars twinkled brightly, silent witnesses to humanity's journey. Whatever came next, they knew one thing for certain. As long as people chose to care for each other, Earth would always have a fighting chance.